right, we are live and people are joining.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome everybody to FUNtrepreneurs. We are so excited to have you join us. We're just gonna wait for just a minute while I see the numbers are loading so people are jumping on.
Get it jumping.
The numbers are rising and we like to not start until we have everybody who's trying to get on. I know sometimes the system lets them in little by little. So we have about 28 guests right now and counting.
But Dave, on our next show, we should have you with a band in the background, kind of like the intro to the Tonight Show.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I'll talk to the guys.
yeah, well, Chrissy can turn and be like, all right, Dave, send us out with a good song.
All right.
We actually recorded last week.
Oh yeah, that's great. You're back doing some live gigs, right?
Yeah, we got to edit it down. They have to edit my
guys,
parts
it looks
out
like
of
we're
it.
holding pretty steady at about 28 wonderful guests. So I'm going to go ahead and start the introduction. So bear with me. All right. All right, everyone, welcome to FUNtrepreneurs. This episode of FUNtrepreneurs, we are going to be talking to tenants and landlords and representatives of tenants and landlords. And the idea is that we're all going to be speaking and communicating about working together on some of the pandemic-related issues that we are all facing. We've put together a fantastic presentation today. Our FUNtrepreneurs is a production of United Play. Thank you, United Play. Your hosts for today are going to be Bob Krause and Dave Wilson, the founders of United Play. And we have amazing panelists from our community. We have got RJ, we've got Jennifer. They are both representing the real estate side of things, and they will have a minute to introduce themselves. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly. We also have Kevin and Sheryl. So I am going to go ahead and I just want to do a few housekeeping things right now. First of all, we are going to be talking about a lot of legal things. But we're getting a lot of advice, and I just want to remind everybody that this is not to be taken or considered legal advice. We want to make sure that you do contact your own attorneys and your own local representation when moving forward and making decisions. This is really just a discussion of options that are on the table. And so right now we're going to go ahead. We're going to let RJ start, and then we'll go to Kevin and then Jennifer and then Sheryl, and then we'll have Dave and Bob start us off. So everybody's going to have just a few minutes. Go ahead and introduce yourself. And RJ, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Chrissy, for having us and United Play team. I think this is going to be an exciting conversation. Before we get started, the real contention will be tonight on the debate. Hopefully it's not too emotional and all these kinds of things, but this is not going to be contentious. I think it's a good way to start in the sense that Jennifer and I are not going to be contentious, right? Our landlord and tenant. In any case, a little bit about me. My name is RJ Mohindra. I'm with FEC Real Estate. My background, real brief, is I studied commercial real estate in grad school. I've been a broker for the last 5 years. I cut my teeth in corporate, where I was in the same position as a lot of you guys as far as being a tenant and dealing with brokers. So I understand where you guys are coming from. And I've been in this space for 3 years, and I like to hand it off to keep the optimism. I think you'll learn some good things, and there's a lot of opportunities for us to continue to stay positive. So thanks, Chrissy and United Play, for having me.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you here. Kevin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Lonzo with Lonzo Law. I am an attorney who works in small to mid-sized businesses, transactional work, and a lot of negotiation and mediation. So think of me as the Chris Wallace and the RJ and Jennifer aspect of things. I have probably 80% of my clients are in the FEC industry. either on the landlord side or the tenant side or some of the suppliers. So I have a vast information in terms of all sides. And more than anything, just want to give you some ideas as to what you can either take back to your local council if you have them, and if you don't, reach out to me because I will be happy to at least advise you and take you in a direction to who could help you in these situations.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin. I'm excited to hear from you. Okay, Jennifer, please go ahead.
Just following up with what RJ said, I don't feel like we are competition in this space. We are co-opetition, where we all benefit by working together, and certainly in these instances. I started in commercial real estate a long time ago, back in the 90s, back when Junior Seau's restaurant opened at Mission Valley Center in San Diego. That was my first retail project, and mostly landlord side, Red Development, Westfield. But in the last 5 years doing more tenant rep work, and Uptown Jungle was my foray into the family entertainment world, and that's how I met Bob, and has had experience on both sides. The first deal I was representing the landlord, so I do understand both sides of this deal, and excited to be with you guys.
Awesome, thank you so much, Jennifer. And Sheryl, welcome.
Thank you. What an amazing group. I'm honored to be with all these smart people. And I thank Uptown Play for all their support for putting this together. Most people know I've been in the industry for over 30 years. Yes, I started when I was 10, if you're doing that math. It's all good. You can have that Zoom fade out a different face. But it's really been a pleasure having had a 32-acre facility and been in the trenches and know what it's like to, between my clients now and all the experience I've had, it's really an art of negotiating, and we're going to give you lots of good ideas on how to come out of this bigger, better, and stronger. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sheryl, it's an honor to have you here as well. You were one of the very first people I've ever heard speak at the first industry we went to. So we're glad you're part of this. I'd like to actually introduce my partner, Dave Wilson. And how we got introduced was actually, he was the guy that had originally built a soft play unit that I had purchased from a lady who bought it from a bank who, I guess the company had went bankrupt. And I bought this used unit and called Dave and said, hey, could you fly out to California? I've got some crazy ideas. I'm building a new idea. And that's how I met Dave. And not only did he do a phenomenal job, which I experienced literally some of the best service I'd ever had in my life, but I found him to be extremely creative. So we stayed in touch. And then a couple years later, as I was ready to expand our new concept, which was Uptown Jungle, Dave came along with me to China to come see the manufacture of some of the equipment we were building. He was kind of out there to prove that it really wasn't the best stuff, and it ended up being just the opposite. He loved what we were putting together, and a long story short was a couple years after all this, Dave and I formed a company, United Play, taking advantage of our manufacturing experience that we had, but also being in the business. We were now set up to help other FECs grow and help FUNtrepreneurs envision their dream and make it come true. So Dave comes with 30 years of background in the experience, over 300 FECs under his belt, and literally is one of the hardest working and kindest men I've ever met.
I will confirm.
Thank you, Bob. I will send the $20 out to you in the mail today. As Bob said, I met up with this insanely gifted gentleman that could look at an idea, think about an idea, and then present it in such a way that he could make it reality. Bob started in the events industry for about 15 years plus, both in LA and out in Las Vegas. He represented a lot of commercial brands that you're familiar with and managed and put together large commercial events for them. When he got into this industry, he basically was the spearhead, both technically and from a design standpoint in putting together a chain of, and I hate to use that name because it's not, it's like a family grouping that now registers 8 centers inside of 4 or 5 years in the Uptown Jungle concept. And he has also demonstrated in our company the ability to take his vision and put that into the reality that we present to our customers. And the last thing that I want to say about United Play is we brought a presence of an American-based company with full insurance and project management and a commitment of the owners to be involved in a project from start to finish. And I think that's what differentiates us from a lot of other firms. And just a last shout out to Chrissy for putting this whole thing together for us. She's our director of marketing here, and she's done a fantastic job doing this. So with that, I believe Bob is going to ask the first question. So I'm going to turn it back to Bob.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so just so everyone's clear, the whole purpose of the FUNtrepreneurs is to bring industry experts together to help those that are either looking at getting into the industry or those that have been in it for a while or have been in it for a long time. We figured there's a lot to be learned from people who have been in it for a good while. And so our purpose today is to help you better understand what you can do to work if you're currently under a lease and you're stuck in a position and you don't know what to do and COVID has taken its toll on your business. What would be some things we can do to discuss ways to help that? The other thing that we want to talk about are ways that we can understand from the landlord's perspective of what they're up against. So this isn't a one against the other. It's really just to have a deeper understanding. That's why you have this wonderful panel. With that being said, I'm going to ask the first question. And the question is basically, as professionals, and RJ, this will kind of come your direction, but can you tell us some of the challenges that tenants are facing today that were, of course, a little different than they were 6 months ago?
I mean, I think the main challenge obviously is the stymied by COVID, right? So at the end of the day, less revenue equals harder opportunity to pay for rent. So and that's what it goes down to. That's the service of this Zoom call, right? So today it's less people coming in because of various regulations, in which case, you know, a big nut that they have on their expense side, which could be anywhere from 17 to 19%, or unfortunately it could be 23% or whatever you have, is your rent. So obviously the service of this phone call is to talk about how we can get through that.
And we know that you said rent. I know that running our own places, our biggest expense is always labor, right? Labor takes a big chunk of the monthly, and then rent is right underneath that. And so our goal today, hopefully, is to share some ideas and insights from a legal perspective and everybody else's perspective of what you could do to maybe negotiate, find ways to work with your tenant. And one of the we had a meeting last Friday with all of us. And one of the underlying things that I noticed that was Kevin especially kind of talked a lot about was the importance of communication, right? That is really important from this point on to communicate with your landlord. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to aim this question towards Kevin, but I also wanted to just make a point. I'm from the Northeast, and we were the first to experience the COVID back in March, and immediate restrictions were put in force in many areas. And as a result of that, we've kind of come out of it quite a bit. And what I want to bring this up for is, you may be in a state that has certain financial abilities that they'll give you to live through this period. And you may also be in a position where your state hasn't gotten that far into the process yet. So I would really, really strongly request that you all ask your state government what can be done and look into those different areas. And Kevin, with that in mind, what do you think the biggest pain points that landlords are facing, and what are their options right now?
I think most of, and Jennifer may be able to talk on this even more, but I think what I'm seeing from the landlords is they're struggling because just as most of the facilities who are paying rent to them have that monthly cost, the owners and landlords are equally in that situation where they've got a mortgage or they've got certain terms under which they purchased that on. So I think that's their straight biggest pain point, and they're trying to negotiate their overhead just as much as anybody else's. They may be on a bigger scale than some of our facilities are at, but in general, it's amplitude, or it's amplified up to them. You want to piggyback on that, Jennifer?
Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead if you want to.
Oh, so I mean, just to Kevin's point, communication is key, and landlords don't want to see anyone fail, and they're willing to do what they can within the constraints of their financial obligations to help these tenants through, whether that's, you know, a rent reduction or a rent deferral, rent abatement. In some cases, they may even extend a loan. So they're trying to get creative so that everyone can kind of weather the storm and come out of it. One of the things I noted this morning is that, you know, in May 2015, 50% of tenants were paying their rent in the United States. And 4 months later, as of September 15th, we're at 77% of retailers are paying their rent. And so that's a huge jump. And in comparison to a year ago, September in 2019, it was 88%. So we're really, you know, we're 11% off at this point from last year. So that's encouraging. I feel like we're, you know, maybe on the upward swing, we hope.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
You know, Bob, before we go off this topic, I want to do like behind the scenes for a minute. I thought what Kevin said on Friday was so important. And I think a lot of people are afraid to talk to their landlord. So Kevin, can you tell them when you think it would be the right time to talk to their landlord? Should we wait till the very last minute?
Yesterday. I say that in all sincerity, or in all sincereness. There is a general thought process that if I avoid the problem, I don't have to deal with the problem. And really all that's going to do is frustrate whoever you're dealing with. I kind of made the joke about being the Chris Wallace and the mediator between this group, but in general, I do a lot of that on a day-to-day basis because tenants are afraid, or my clients are afraid to talk to their big bad landlord, who's really just a person just like them. And as Jennifer said, is just trying to survive as well. And the only way to actually get to a solution is if you guys communicate with your landlords and begin that process immediately when you think there's going to be a problem. You may have some that come out and don't care, but for the majority of the situations I've dealt with, they don't want to see you fail because they don't want to go through the process of finding a new tenant and reimagining their space. So
with that in mind, Jennifer, I have a question for you. How would you break the different types of landlords? There's kind of your Class A property owners, right, which are going to be the big shopping malls, and those are going to be probably a REIT of some sort or some big conglomerate, right?
Yeah, so you've got the nationals that own properties in and out of the United States. You've got your regionals, and then you've got your locals. For instance, our company, we are based in Arizona, and we own, I think, around 25, 30 shopping centers and are developing a dozen more. So you're dealing with us, and each one of those properties has different partners on it. The debt service on each one is different. So you're kind of, from the landlord's perspective, they're going to do what they can within the confines of what they're obligated to.
Right.
We have a question, and I just wanted to break this real quick and say to our attendees, because I don't believe I said it earlier, if you do have questions, please feel free to go into either the chat or the Q&A, and I will be monitoring them. So on that, based on what we were talking about, we do have a question. This is from Elise, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name. So the question is, in some circumstances, we are hearing of situations where banks are extending leniency to landlords and their loans, and those incentives are not being extended to the tenants in those situations. What do you guys suggest from the FEC owners? What do you suggest that the FEC owners should do?
I can chime in there. in that kind of situation, it goes back to having a very transparent conversation in a relationship. I actually haven't heard of that in the most recent times, but at the end of the day, if you have a good relationship with them, then you should be able to have that transparency. It doesn't really behoove them to be able to have that relief and, to try to like kick you out, right? So if they're going to put pressure on you, then you pay as much as you can. And at the end of the day, if they continue to put pressure on you, what are you going to do? They're not going to kick you out, right? So you pay as much as you can if they're not being transparent, and then you hope that obviously they're not going to do anything.
Let me add one other thing in real quick for Kevin, or for Jennifer. Have you heard of states that are offering tenants abatements and rent, putting rents on hold for a number of months, etc.?
Yeah, we're seeing that here in Arizona. If they're giving some sort of rent deferral, they'll just tack that on to the term, or they'll set a precedent where anything that is forgiven in the short term is made up within 12 months or 18 months. They're just kind of on a case by case, but they are willing to work with them.
They tried that in California with something called SB 939. I don't know if you heard about that, Jennifer, but basically the government tried to put into place in May where landlords, if they saw distress for a tenant as far as their revenue, as well as when the distress started, that that they wouldn't be able to evict them. So I think in June, it did not pass, but I understand it's going to be appealed. So that's kind of progressive as far as California.
So I think the underlying message here is, for everybody watching, it's a really good idea for you to look into your local laws, not only within the state that you're in, but probably within your own city. I know here in San Diego, where I'm at, there are funds being put together, probably more for like restaurants and other small businesses, but where they're trying to give either gifts or small loans, 0 or 1% interest, to try to help people get through. And so this brings us back again to the fact that we have landlords of different size and scopes, right? I think of one of my landlords who was an ex-military guy who now owns about 15 properties in San Diego. And I remember him being very tough. I mean, when we did his lease, he didn't want to budge, but he was one of these guys, if we had any problems with our building, he literally had a repair guy out that same day. He was a man of honor and by his word, right? So when this all came down, when COVID started to hit, we said, hey, we need to work with you. At first, he was really wanted to be inflexible, because in his mind, no, you need to pay the rent. But he became more flexible, but we had to communicate with him and explain and show that, what's happening. And over time, he began to understand what COVID meant for everybody. I think the key here, again, is to remember that it's important that you have good conversations, even if it's just is it the landlord rep? So in the case, it'd be the broker, right? Jennifer, who would someone call? Would it be their original broker? What would be the chain in which they'd want to communicate?
So once they're a tenant, they're going to be working directly with the landlord on that. They can involve their broker, and I would absolutely involve their attorney. Once they get served a default notice, which a landlord's going to do the minute they're late just to protect themselves, they're going to want to get real familiar with their lease terms. What are they bound to? And then is there a lease restructuring down the line? But I would absolutely involve someone like Kevin, who can speak to the force majeure clause and maybe introduce, some COVID language if it's not in there. I can't stress enough, the attorney is your best friend at this point, because the broker's deal is done. The broker's represented both sides. They're paying rent. And now it's a landlord-tenant issue.
But Jennifer, if I can chime in there, I think it's important. Definitely, you should by this point have a good relationship, right? If you don't, you need to make sure that you're aligned with your landlord in light of everyone kind of being under the same distress. But I think, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, like a lot of clients will come back to me and say, hey, how can I help with this situation? Because what happens is I'm not going to call them, because when you get a broker involved, then traditionally it can be a little bit like, why is he getting involved? Yeah. I'm a little bit more behind the scenes. And then at the end of the day, you kind of don't want an attorney to get too involved. Now, I think, Kevin, maybe it can become acrimonious if too many parties jump in. It's better to start on base level to already develop that relation, and if not, then to build on it now.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. And to kind of go back to answer the initial question, which was, if you're at a point where they're not giving you incentives and you're ever at a point where some form of default or anything has been filed against you, it gets more complicated, but you need to get an attorney involved because you need to protect your own interests. Period. End of story. Trying to communicate really at that point can lead to, without extra help or guidance from something behind the scenes, can lead to you putting yourself in a bad way. I will be honest, a lot of the conversations I have, I'm basically playing puppet master to my client and saying, I've drafted this letter for you, send it to them. I know that you're not putting yourself in a bad position by saying this, because attorneys in general are wordsmiths, because the difference between may and shall is infinite in terms of the legal world. So just having some base knowledge of that allows you to be able to know what you're talking about. And I forget who, I think Jennifer said, jump into your lease. There's going to be words in there that lawyers don't understand, because every lawyer is different in how they write, and some go back to, old English, and you got to be able to parse that out.
And with that being said,
Oh.
Kevin, I think it's also important to remember that if you're looking into this business for the first time or getting ready to sign a lease, if you don't have an attorney look at your lease for you, you're making a huge, huge mistake, because every lease is written for and in behalf, there's that old English, right? For and in behalf of the landlord. It is not written to be tenant friendly. So your attorney's going to have to scratch and claw to get language removed, modified. One example is, most people don't realize the minute you sign for a building, you're responsible for the HVAC unit, which I brought up before, but the reason it's formidable, because if one of those goes out, it could be anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000 to replace it. And not only does it have to be replaced right away because you're going to need it, but you're responsible to pay for the whole thing. So if you can negotiate that in advance, you can have a thing where the landlord pays for part of it, or they'll pay for all of it up to the first year or two. There's different ways to negotiate. That's just one example of things to be aware of.
Yeah.
Depends how good your tenant rep broker is.
Well, hey, look, and that's a huge example, right? Because per FEC standards, what you're supposed to have with all the arcades and all these kinds of things in the heat and bowling, depending on what city you're in, you want 1 ton per 250 square feet, right? Each ton can cost you anywhere around $1,000, depending on how they're doing it. And so that can eat up a lot of your TI dollars unless you ask for it in advance. So HVAC is a huge thing. I mean, that's a separate subject, but for those of you that are looking at leases, I think it's definitely penny wise, pound foolish to spend, money on an attorney when you're signing a 10-year lease. But yeah, HVAC is, make sure you look out for that one. That's huge. Okay,
So I have a question that's come through here. It's actually kind of a series of questions, but what is the incentive for a landlord to evict a tenant when it's difficult to fill the vacancy? And is it legal for them to serve a pay or quit notice during the eviction memorandum? And then they go on to, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of people in this situation. What if they are at a point where they can't afford an attorney to help them negotiate? And then I know we're going to get into this question, but then the last question by this person, Steve, is how does he protect his gains and his assets from the landlord seizing those things? So I know that is a packed question with lots of pieces, but let's start with the top one, the first one. What are their rights, and how can landlords deal with situations when they are financially not in a position to is there
Landlords or tenants? You meant tenant. Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, before you answer that, Kevin, I just want to say one really quick thing to the person who said, what if you can't afford an attorney? You can't afford not to have an attorney.
Yes.
I'm just saying, when you're budgeting for all these projects and different things, your attorney is your best friend. Even if they just write a letter that you sign, you make sure, as Kevin said, that the proper wording is there so you don't get in trouble. Now let Kevin
But considering that we're on the flip side, their contracts, their leases have already been written. They're mid-COVID and struggling at the moment.
Most attorneys will talk to you for free for at least the first hour. Have a conversation before you do anything. You know, you may not think, I've done presentations before where I talk about the fact that, you know, being proactive can save you thousands in the long run, because ultimately there is a misconception, and there are lots of lawyers out there that will tell you, I charge $750 an hour and that's what it is. They're insane. I don't know why anybody would ever pay for that, but you can find a way. And honestly, every attorney I know, especially in this business area, will talk to you for free for an hour and at least give you some concepts and some guidance. To answer your question, is it, you know, legal for a landlord to serve a pay or quit notice? It depends. I don't know where you're at. I don't know what your situation is, but it's a case-by-case situation, which only can be answered by somebody taking the time to call the lawyer. You call and say, hey, I need to talk to a lawyer. They're going to give you the time, or they're going to tell you, you have to pay me a certain amount to have a conversation with me. And if they say that, hang up and call a different one. I'm sure my contact information is in here. I'll be happy to have a conversation, at least give you some guidance.
Yeah, and the nice thing about Kevin that I do know is that he also does a retainer situation, which is great. You just pay a monthly amount, and then he does a certain amount of work for you, and it kind of just, so there's different ways to approach it. But if you're absolutely out of money, I'd say take advantage of Kevin's conversation. You can reach out to Dave or I or any of us to try to see what we can do to help you. Again, we're having this whole discussion because we care about all of our FEC friends and owners in the business. So that all of us, well, I'm gonna speak for Dave and I know we're available to chat. I'm sure, I know everybody else here on this panel, their quality, they'll be willing to at least give you some good advice. And then just what I would say is, the last thing you asked, Steve, was, how do I protect my games, my assets from being seized? Well, Sheryl, why don't you tell us what you said earlier before we hopped on, what you thought was a good idea and how to protect your assets.
Yeah, cover your ears, Kev.
Kevin's plugging his ears.
Did you notice that everybody's covering their ears so that they don't hear what I had to say? I did not advise my client to do this. They told me they were doing this. When they had a really bad, tough conversation with their landlord, and they knew that there was a possibility that within 24 to 48 hours, they were going to get a padlock on their door until they could come to terms. They showed up that night with 218 tractor trailers, whatever, and they loaded all their most expensive equipment and got it off property. I'm not saying that that's what you should do. Notice Kevin's like not even looking at me. But to protect it, you know,
let me add something here, because I think it's very important. If you're in a situation in your business where you've gotten funding, where you have a bank loan, an SBA loan, I can guarantee you have your equipment as a
Collateral.
holding item that they're using for collateral. So they're going to have a first right to that equipment, whether the landlord expresses an interest in keeping it or not. And if he would put a padlock on the door, the bank would sue the landlord to get a hold of the equipment so they could dispose of it. One of the other routes that I would suggest you think about possibly is going to your bank and trying to possibly restructure your loan to try to get some additional terms or funding to cover you, to get an attorney hired to get you through this period of time, because they don't want to take back your equipment either, because then they have to sell it for 20 cents on the dollar. And so they're your funding position. Now, the second thing I'll say is this: if you own your equipment outright, the first thing I would do is set up a second corporation, which does not in any way connect you with the corporation named in your lease, and then lease yourself your equipment in your second corporation, because then your landlord could not come after that equipment. But that's only if you own it.
And
by the way, my
Wait.
disclaimer for when I said that was that my client owned all that equipment outright. They had paid for it. I'm not saying all these other options. Go ahead, Kevin.
it just depends. That's the reality. If you've got a personal guarantee on your lease, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
If you got a personal guarantee, you can open up 12 different corporations, spread it all around. You own them all and they can come after it. So it just depends, which then goes back to the original, the running theme here. Communicate, build a good relationship, and know your terms of your lease, or have somebody that does and can do that for you.
And
That's going to
hopefully
be your best way.
And hopefully to that point, Kevin, in your original lease that you had a PG burn off, so that way your personal guarantee is less over time. But yeah, if you're personally guaranteed, as Kevin said, that it is, and you don't, and if it's free and clear, yeah, they're going to come after it if they
Yeah, and unfortunately, due to our industry being a little bit of a mom and pop business, they're going to require personal guarantees on the loan, the lease, everything, right? So as soon as they come after one, they're going to come after the other one. And that's where it can get really kind of ugly, because once you've committed yourself personally, you can have people come at different angles. There is a question from Karen Davis that I do want to address, I think would be good. But let me just finish with one other thought. So we got a phone call, I don't know, a year and a half ago from a gentleman who was a landlord of a building in Iowa, who said, hey, I've just become a new owner of a Sky Zone because my tenant who owned the Sky Zone franchise was unable to run his business properly and was so far behind in rent that I took it over. And he put his son in charge of it. They just turned the whole place around. They bought a bunch of new equipment from us. It was great, right? But here's what's interesting. He worked out the terms, and I don't know the specifics, but he worked it out basically so the guy that had this long-term lease could kind of walk away, and he inherited this equipment and kind of took it over. Keep in mind that there will be some landlords here in the future. They're going to see this as an opportunity where, let's say, maybe your only choice really is to try to walk away from it. And without filing bankruptcy and the other things, you may have to give up some of that to a landlord that's willing to take that on and become an operator. Sheryl, you and I had a long discussion on this before. Like, there probably will be a surgence in the future here of operating companies that will be sought after by some of these larger landlords that don't know what to do with all this stuff. But that is something to consider. And then the other option, I think, Kevin, you mentioned, is maybe you say, hey, listen, you can have my business and then hire me as the operator to run it or whatever. But there are options and ways to work around. Chrissy, do you want to read the question from Karen?
Actually, Chrissy, before we talk about Karen, because it has to do with her, I want to ask everybody on the group, I think what I'm seeing with all of my clients, that the landlords, I can divide them into 3 buckets. 1/3 are saying exactly what Karen's saying. No, 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 we are not doing anything. You know, they dig their heels in and it's an absolute no. 1/3 are trying their absolute best to do something with you, but they still have bills to pay. And then there's 1/3 that will do any and everything to save it because they know they're not going to be able to rent it. And now you can go over to Karen's great question.
Let's see. She did ask that we just list the name of the panelists and their roles in the chat. So I've
well, she actually said that her landlord does not want to budge on her current lease, that she just got the phone with it. Can you, so with that being the fact that you've got a landlord that doesn't want to budge, I think you may have missed the conversation, Karen, but it's all about communication. So, you know,
can I jump in on that one real quick? If
Yeah.
I can jump in, because that, Karen, when you say that, there's a lot of meat behind that question, right? There is, and we've talked about this, and I think let's back up. There's a lot of optimistic and things that can move the needle to get your landlord to budge. And I talk to a lot of clients, and actually some people that aren't even clients that reach out, that I kind of talk through things. So if you can type what you've already tried, for example, where you would want to start, for example, is free rent. That is obviously the best case. Then after that, you can talk about forbearance, where they add, you know, the amount on the back end. There are a lot of different things, and if you can tell us where you are, and then we can help you navigate and tell us what you've already tried, it'll make it a lot easier to answer your question.
Okay, Dave, next question's for you.
It is. When a landlord, we've kind of covered this already, but basically the question is, when a landlord is not in a position to be flexible, are there options? I think we've covered quite a few of things that are out there, but Does anyone have anything additional to add to that? I think you just hit on some stuff, RJ.
I can go ahead, Kim.
I was going to just say the world's your oyster in that area. Like whatever you can imagine is possible. And that's really, and it again goes back to the communication aspect. Anything you can imagine up and propose to them that might work can work. You're not restricted to certain confines. I know there are the go-tos of free rent or deferment or, revenue share, something that people have been talking about, but ultimately the options are whatever you guys can come up with. So it's really an unlimited, you're allowed to contract for anything you want to that's legal. And there are very few restrictions in terms of how you pay back that debt. So I think a lot of the your options really come from not just from paid help or professionals, just talking to people and talking to your landlord and saying, hey, what are some other ways? Some of the things I've heard from clients that have come from like their next door neighbor as an idea of how to be able to make something work because they heard about it and the landlord bought on it. And it's just finding what works between you and your landlord. There are lots of options.
RJ and Jennifer, here's a question. Besides deferred rent, free rent, what are some of the things you're hearing out there that are plausible or presentable? One of them was, I know if you're in a mall, you could say percentage of sales, right? What are some other things that we could throw a few other things out just for our viewers to grab onto?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go so far as tons. I mean, to keep that momentum of optimism, right? So Simon Property Group, one of the largest malls, they're actually investing in some of the guys they know are going to be solvent in the future. Deferment of rent is there, obviously. Interest is always there. Yeah, an equity stake is there. Return the security deposit there is there. On the revenue side, you can try to talk about an outdoor patio if you're in a retail center. Like Bob talked about, sales percentage rent. You can talk about, Walmart's doing drive-ins right now. And so they have it in their parking lot. And so that's something to think about too. Now a landlord will say, well, hey, look, we can't do that. Well, then who do you go to? You go to your city. Say, hey, dude, don't you want me to pay? This is a huge attraction. FECs are going to be here. We're going to be solvent. After 2008, we did wonderful. You have your business plan, you have your strategy behind it, you have IAPA, some of the information the lease can present as far as how good we're going to be in the future. And you just continue, like Kevin said, you sell, and you come up with some of the things I've said. Outdoor patio is great. I have a client that's working on that. It's another revenue source. So you kind of just go through as much as you can, like Kevin said.
Good. Those are good. Thank you. Anybody else a comment on that?
Go to your.
I would like to just say very quickly that some cities and states are letting places open up by percentages. Like in New Jersey, indoor dining and an FEC is allowed to have 25% of its normal occupancy at this present stage. It's going to go to 50 down the road. You could offer your landlord, if you could afford it, 25% of your rent as an option, because there's a reason for doing it. You can only do 25% of the business, and he may be open to something like that. So that's just another option you could possibly offer.
Go take advantage of what your city offers too. There's an economic development board in almost every city. There's a chamber of commerce in almost every city. They have resources, they have people there. They will give you ideas. They can help support. Mm-hmm. They've got programs, tax abatements, all sorts of things that could probably help along the way, or could even be something to present towards your landlord in terms of a tax abatement if they're the owner. There's so many options. You just got to go ask and dig.
Yeah, you definitely can't bury your head in the ground and hope it goes away at this point, right, Kevin? I mean, this is the type of thing where you've got to be proactive every waking moment to try to solve this issue and get resolve with the landlord.
Yeah, absolutely. And I brought this up during our conversation on Friday. People in my city have no idea that they have up to $5,000 or $10,000 loan options or grants from the city that are for small businesses. Our state has a bridge gap option, and then that on top of any other funding, on top of extra grants that are just being put together by philanthropists who want to see small local businesses succeed. So there's just an abundance of opportunity that people just aren't aware of because they're not looking, and they'd rather stick their head in the ground and avoid it and hope that things go back to normal rather than trying to find the new solution. So dig, talk to the people, and your city will be wanting to help you because they want to see local businesses succeed.
Bob, I have another idea that I just thought of, and I've been brainstorming about it, and I think it's an easy platform. So obviously, you can look to give up equity not only to a landlord, but you can do it. There's an avenue called Next Seat, which is basically crowdfunding for stuff like our industry, FECs, restaurants, where you can give up a debt portion. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to do that, but the idea of obviously having, 10% of zero, or, having very little versus giving up a portion and continuing to at least have revenue. Another thing that if you're really under a lot of distress is you can also try to sublease it. You can also try to sublease it. And of course, the landlord will have discretion as to who's going to go back in that space. But, there are FECs that may want to come over and try to take over your space as well.
And that's really good. By the way, we're going to have an episode with Sheryl in the next month or so. And we're going to talk specifically about what you can do with your venue. Because I know with my 8 locations, we've got the 2 of them closed in California. So what could I do with my empty space? It's sitting unused. I don't want to have to go put my full liability insurance on all my climbing walls and trampoline parks, but could I rent the space out to like a private school that needs to use the space for having a place for their students to come to? Could it be used for a local church to have afternoon events or something of that nature? So at least there's some revenue coming in. So I think the other thing is to maybe think differently about what you've been doing with your space, especially if it's closed or if it's at a limited capacity. Could you use some of that space to generate additional revenues? I think it's just all about finding out right now to scratch at every dollar possible. So here's another.
We're doing that on the 13th, I believe.
Okay, good, great. So here's a question for the panel. What would be the advice you'd want to give people who are in the process of looking at the family entertainment industry? And I'll start with this just to tell you that I have a very well-connected friend who told me that 3 months ago, when Topgolf's stock dropped dramatically, he bought a ton of it, and it's already up like 30% since he bought it, because people know that this is just an episode, right? We're going to make it through this. This is a very economic resilient industry, and typically, of course, COVID has broken all the rules and all the things we do. But this is an industry that even in 2008, 2009 continued to do good, right? It definitely had a little drop, but people found it to be still in a very affordable form of family entertainment. So with that in mind, what's the advice from our members here on the panel to give to anybody looking at getting in our industry?
Brilliant. I can speak kind of on the front lines as far as, having clients that are looking all over for space. Landlords are clamoring for our use. At the end of the day, they're not going to be able to get a solvent apparel company or something that's out there, especially with Amazon running as prevalent as they are, right? So just sit and continue to be patient, get your financing in a solid position, get your business plan in a solid position, so that when you do see all the space that comes online, and it's already starting to come online in the retail space, especially in the mall space, especially industrial will continue to be strong just because of all the distribution. But there will be lots of space, good pricing, TIs will be prevalent. I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity in the future.
Jennifer, you work with Westfield, I believe, in that area. What are you seeing?
Oh, I used to work for Westfield back in 2001. I think I left. So it's been a few days. Getting into that business, it's a great business. You can have a lot of success. Just go in with your eyes open and have a great attorney involved to help protect you. Try and limit your exposure on a corporate guarantee or a personal guarantee to the point of, the landlord's recovery of TI and any commissions paid. One thing that I noted this morning is that the CCIM Institute and for real estate management is working on pandemic risk insurance. or business interruption coverage relief. So get familiar with what's ongoing by other players in the field and see what solutions they're coming up with and what protections you can have aside from just a force majeure or something in your lease.
Good.
I can.
Suppose we were just getting.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to say I can speak about Westfield. Ironically enough, I'm dealing with a landlord up in Annapolis, and we're about to represent some stuff, and they're already reduced at 25% on the rent side. Their TI dollars are going to go up a lot as well. I mean, the good thing about going to a mall is that obviously, you know, they're in a really challenging position and they want a really good anchor, and we are considered anchors. And again, it goes back to the dollars that's going to be out there and the rent reduction that's going to be continuing to go down. So Westfield's hungry.
We have a client that's in a mall up in Santa Ana here, and they're looking at Downey, which is like 30 miles away. And they are begging him to bring the concept to their next series of malls. I mean, they've had senior executives come into their facility from Westview and wanted to tour and then say, what can we do to help you get to the next location? Can we give you like first year free or highly reduced rent or take just a percentage of sales? They're being very aggressive because the malls are going to continue to struggle. I'll be honest with you, I don't know that side of the rent side very well. But I think if you can find the right formula and you work with the right mall, especially if you can work with a percentage of sales, if things struggle, they go down with you. If they do well, you do well, they do well with you. So there are different ways to look at how you can do your rent. And I think just the key is to make sure that you be really aware of what you're signing, because, this is I know for us, it's a 10-year lease. We never did anything less than that because we figured we're not going to be, if we can't be in business for 10 years, we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't sign the leases we're doing. So keep in mind that, these are big commitments, because once you fill that space with your equipment, you put all the, efforts into building that out. The last thing you want to do is be in some 3-year term lease, and then you got to turn around and take everything out of there. So think long-term. That would probably be some good advice too, for those that are looking into it. Think long-term about this business, because it will remain strong as long as you do your business. I have a friend, John Hewish, who was the inventor of the Family Entertainment Center, him and his brother. I've often spoken on other webinars. And Jennifer, you remember the Family Fun Centers, right?
Yeah.
And he said, whatever you do in year 10, or whatever you do in year 3 is what you're going to do in year 10, as long as you run your business well. It's all what you do in the first 3 years of your business. So I think, if you've got a good idea and you stick to your values of quality service and customer care and great, experience, you're in a business that should be able to stick around for many, many, many years to come.
I'd like to speak a little bit on something too. As was said, I've been in this industry 30 years. When we first started in this industry, the concept of an FEC was an unknown factor to landlords. And I think RJ's comment right there was very, very telling. Now, family entertainment centers are being looked at as potential anchor attractions. It's obvious that mall space is going to become more and more available. And I think what has actually happened, COVID has shown that more and more people are going to be working and ordering things online, which is going to decrease the need for retail space. And I think there's going to be more flexibility in our industry going forward than at any other time. And again, mall space has everything built into it that you need. You have the permitting already. One of the issues you have with industrial space is usually, you can get it for a lot less per square foot, but you usually have to spend on HVAC. The parking is normally inadequate. So what is great about mall spaces, but I would also advise that you have outside entrance only, outside or inside, that you have an outside door, because that's extremely important. We were located in a mall up in Carmel, Indiana for 5 years, and we had a great run up there till, we weren't in a position to re-sign a lease just because the landlord was increasing the rent so much after that. But Indiana's a nice state. Was out there many times.
Hey, can I piggyback off of that real quick as well? Sorry, I'm just talking about a lot of the terms here. When you talk about a mall, when you talk about a retail center, one thing that, Jennifer mentioned as far as some of the lease clauses that are important in case we do have another pandemic, which I guess is kind of like a hurricane. They say it's only going to happen every 500 years and it continues to happen every year in Texas. But in any case, I think that co-tenancy is really important. In a mall, there's so many really small tenants. You have to make sure that if and when they default, you are protected as far as your rent being reduced. It's just a huge clause that you kind of have to forecast in light of some of, 101 retailers that are up for jeopardy to default that you're protected against in the future. And Kevin, I mean, that's just my kind of basic understanding, but I think co-tenancy is somewhat important. So.
There were a couple last questions, gang. One of them was, what are the pros and cons of hiring a third party to negotiate the lease terms based on the pandemic versus doing it on your own? And I don't know what third party there'd be besides maybe an attorney. Maybe there's some sort of advocacy group. Maybe that's the question. And what would be the range? What would you expect to pay for something like this? I'm not familiar of anything besides like legal, but are there any quick reactions to that from someone that might have experience?
We're putting out a coaching program, actually. It's going to be coming out pretty quickly. We're putting out a coaching program. We'll be behind the scenes and we'll be coaching. So with the strategies we talked about.
Good. Kevin?
I was going to say, I'm sure that there's people out there who are understanding of leases and have good relationships with larger landlords to be able to do that. But I mean, the pros and cons. Pros are infinite. Cons are it costs money. But it will save you a lot in the long run if you try to do it yourself. It is amazing how much people will change their mind if you send them a letter on your own letterhead versus sending them a letter that says Lonzo Law or so-and-so law, Smith and Smith. For some reason, people actually start paying attention because they think you're serious, because their image is, oh, you're taking it serious enough to spend some money on it, so I guess I'm going to respond appropriately.
Right. And I'll tell you from my own experience, if you can take the time to ask for a meeting with somebody, go to their office to sit and chat with them, or invite them to your facility to walk through it in case they haven't been there in a while, and they either see it at 25% capacity or empty, you can kind of, allow them to understand what your difficulty is, and they're no dummy, they get it. But I think being able to have that one-on-one contact could help your situation, because there again, like Kevin said, you're showing them that you're making the effort to let them know that you understand that, they're in charge, right? You signed their lease. So you're there to I don't want to say pull heartstrings, that's the wrong term, but to show the human side of the business and to be able to connect with them in a way to say, look, I'm doing everything I can. Let me tell you some of the things we're going to be working on in the near future. What can we do to work? Can you tell me what you need from me? What things are you thinking about? Explore with them to get them to talk and speak out loud and give them an opportunity to share. Because in the art of negotiation, they tell you that, you set it up and you let them do the talking. You say, well, how am I supposed to make the rent? And you just stop. How am I supposed to do this with COVID? And just wait and see what they say. Well, I don't know. Let me think. Well, here's some things we've been thinking about. So give them an opportunity to express to you what they're looking for. And then maybe you can find some sort of neutral ground, because I think it's very clear. Nobody wants to have an empty space because they're not going to fill it right now with somebody else. So if that's, you may be the best thing they have. And then there was one other question. Is there anyone else that was successful in getting business interruption money? I don't know if that would be something that people would chat online could answer. That would probably be better to come from our viewers. But, there is stimulus money that came out. We all know about that. And there's supposed to be, another $2 trillion package that the Democrats are hoping to pass. Did they get that right? So I don't know where that money's going to go, but that's a lot of money. I would imagine it's going to be the next round that they're going to have to keep the economy in somewhat of a check. So, and that's supposed to be passed sometime in the next like week or something, I believe, if not this week.
I'll chime in on this. I'm guessing they're talking about business interruption insurance.
Yes.
I have seen no clients get that because insurance plans are written not to pay you. In general, that's the hope of an insurance plan, is that you'll pay them and not pay you. But ultimately, the reason being is most of them are not covered under, explicitly say, this does not include viruses or pandemics or some language along that, disease, illness, those types of things are actually specifically excluded from this. And I've had multiple clients who have attempted. However, that being said, try it, submit it, appeal it, be a thorn, because that's the fastest way to be able to at least get the attention to potentially have them send it to you. But chances are you're going to get a response letter that specifically pulls the section that says this is excluded from this particular plan. However, it gives you the opportunity to, in the future, make sure that that's not in there and seek to have that removed.
And having that letter is actually getting another thing you can communicate with your landlord. Look, I tried pulling my insurance. They denied me. I'm trying this. We're trying that. Again, remember that they've seen it all, right? I think, Jennifer, is it fair to say that landlords just want to, probably the most important, they want to know that you're doing everything possible, right?
Yeah,
make
they're
it right.
gonna, when you go to meet with that landlord, you want to come with data, you want to present facts, and you want to have a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach, and they're going to appreciate that. You know, just because you can Google your way through something doesn't mean you should. So if you're going to find yourself in a sticky situation like that, communicate and enlist the help of your attorney. That's the best advice I can give.
Great.
You know, Bob, earlier you asked what advice we would give people who are just getting started. And I think one of the things that we did that really helped us throughout our business is not wait until there's a crisis for the communication, but whoever that landlord representative is, bring them over, make them part of your team's, you know, VIP event. Have their grandkids have their birthday party at your facility. Have all the tenants in your area come together and say, hey, the landlord wanted us to throw this appreciation party for you. And the landlord's going to sit there and say, wow, you did so much for me, proactive. How can I help you? And that's, you know, how you get better relationships. And the other question is,
that happened actually in our Mesa store. We opened up, it was just going gangbusters. And believe it or not, a huge real estate mogul in Arizona contacted us and said, my team went there. They told me to come with my grandkids, and I'm blown away with what you're doing. Not only did he say, I want to put you in one of my buildings, he said, can I invest with you guys? Because I love what you're doing, right? So we can win the hearts of those. Here's the thing. Landlords are entrepreneurial as well, and they're opportunistic. We did talk about this on Friday. Let's remember that they may be a landlord out there that sees your business and is like, gosh, I'd kind of like to get into that. Because here's something I can tell you. I know this for a fact. This is for the men side of the business that I've talked to. Every man that's invested in my business wants to act like a kid again. And they love investing in a business that adds that childlike element in their life. And now I know that's this my personal experience. Guys are like, I'm so excited to be part of this. You know, it's like, this is something cool and fun, right? I guarantee you could find landlords who, yes, they make money with real estate, not as maybe as fun as exciting, but if you said, hey, would you be interested in being a part owner of my business to help us get through this? And maybe that's a way we can give you some equity. But you know, there's all so many different ways to look at how to negotiate with them. And I think, like Jennifer said, come prepared. And I like going to them. But if you could bring them to the facility, there's just lots of ways you can do things you can do to you know, have them feel committed to you because they see you're doing your best.
It's a little disarming to have the landlord come into your business and have them, you know, in your space and walk in your shoes. So it's a good approach. I like that.
Worst case, just cry. I'm just kidding. No, but that's a tongue-in-cheek comment. But at the end of the day, there is an emotional component. Like, I think you guys that negotiate, Jennifer, Kevin, you know, that's what I do every day. And that's what I've cut my teeth on, just kind of being on this side for a while, there's always a hard number side and there's always an emotional component, right? And if you have the number side and you have all the relief and all the data from IAPA and all these kinds of things that you're supporting, all the different solutions, after that, it's the relationship. It's the personal relationship. I had a client that he didn't get. I was like, take the guy out for, you guys already kind of like each other. You're in the same age demographic. You kind of do a lot of the same things. Take him out for a beer. Talk to him. People are a lot. That's why, why do quote unquote a lot of deals get done on the golf course, right? Like it's the relationships, right? I don't play golf, so I think it's just a reason people want to play golf. But it's just kind of it's a soft side that you need to kind of endeavor when you get a chance.
Good point.
I
So
I strongly suggest avoiding golf. No, just kidding.
Personally.
As an inside joke. Okay, we do have a question, and I think this is a good one. What do you do about an insurance company that is making you pay a full premium when their liability is practically nothing because you are closed? Now, I've heard this conversation in the background and an interesting answer, but I'm curious to see what you guys think about that.
I wish we had Rand on the line with us.
Rand.
Lives in the world of insurance. I think that's a little bit technical, but I know in our locations, when we knew we were closed, we had to write letters and say, look, we're going to be out of business for a while. We can't be affording, so I think we have to keep our building insurance, right? The liability from it catching on fire and that kind of stuff. But, when you're talking about these big liability policies for trampoline parks or whatever, those things are draining. Quite frankly, outside of rent or outside of labor, it was usually labor, rent, and insurance. Rent and insurance could be real close to each other depending on the size of your facility. So I would look into that and speak with your broker. It's the best advice I could give right now. There are some people, if you want to text Chrissy or email her, we'll give you some names of a couple insurance specialists that might be able to give you some good advice on that.
We have Richard on here that said that he was able to reduce the rate when he was closed. Thanks, Rand. So apparently he was communicating with Rand. Also, I just wanted to point out a comment that was made in the chat. Everybody can see this, but I just wanted to point it out. And this is from Karen Davis. And people keep commenting, so it's going to go away. They have a part-time counsel who they've been working with, CFO. Has been working with the CFO, who is a lawyer and a banker, said that they have been their angel and worth every cent if anybody needs part-time counsel. It's been the best investment of an FEC that we've made, and she put her contact information, this is Karen from RPM Raceway. So if you guys want to reach out, also that just in my mind, I know that there's a lot of people that are on here that are from different states. So if there's anyone that you are working with locally that you've found helpful, go ahead. And also we will be sharing everybody's contact information along with a replay of this video. So that is, if you guys want to reach out on the side, please, they're going to be available for that. Let's see.
Yeah, on that, I'll throw my hat in the ring as well. I do offer virtual and part-time and all sorts of ways to be able to make sure you guys can make your capital. So
and speak to anybody throughout California or throughout the United States, correct?
Correct. I do what's called outside in-house counsel. So I can be able to work and depending on the attorney and their comfort level, I'm allowed to, whether or not I'm barred in your state, I am barred in Indiana and Florida, but I can do all work, and attorneys can if they're your in-house counsel for intrastate and interstate contracts. So most of the work you're going to be doing is looking at stuff that's between vendors in lots of different states, and so any attorney is able to help you on some level. It just limits your ability to file a lawsuit.
And Kevin, normally we wouldn't get into this because it's not really to be a sales portal, but I think because people are asking about legal, you do something really unique where it's not just by the hour. You offer like a annual plan, right? Or you want to hit on that just real quick because I think it adds a little bit of a breath of fresh air of like, wow, I can actually afford legal.
Yeah, I can tell you that I got out of big business legal because I hated the way that it was set up. Generally legal tells you trust us, we're your lawyer, but we don't trust you. Give us all your money and hold it in an escrow account that's making no interest for anybody. I have found that that is not beneficial for clients, especially small and mid-sized business. So my structure is set up as a monthly payment, reoccurring payment, where you get a set amount of hours, and I go as low as 1 hour a month that you can use over a year, and as low as $300 a month, so you can budget it in. That just allows you to have somebody to call. And under that structure, I really avoid the idea of billing and tracking hours, because reality is, if you call me for a 5-minute conversation to say, hey, Kevin, I have a quick question, and I answer it for you, it takes me more time to go into my billing system and track that rather than just say, I'd rather help you and get you answered and get you on your way. So there are affordable ways out there.
Yeah, I know RJ has to jump off, so I just wanted to go ahead and thank him for being on here. We can stay and chat some more.
I think we're good. I think we're good.
How is everybody feeling? Is there, I did want to just make sure that nobody else had any questions, and I wanted to ask you guys just quickly type your email addresses in the chat real quick for people if they want to write it down right now, but I will be sending it out after. So you guys could reach over into the chat and just type your email real quick in case anybody wants to reach out to you immediately.
Sorry, I'm going to have to chime off. Thanks to United Play, Bob, Dave, Chrissy, you guys have done a fantastic job. You guys do a great job with this. I guess, I don't know, every week. And so thank you for this. And again, and thank you for the other panels. It was great to learn from some of you as well. And good luck to everybody. We're going to get through this. There's a lot of optimism out there. There's a lot of solutions, and there's a lot of great, resources that these guys have talked about. Thank you. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, RJ.
Great job, RJ.
Thank you to all of our panelists,
All right,
and especially those that are watching. We hope you've learned something great today. And remember, this is a phenomenal business to be in. So keep your hopes up that this will eventually, in time this will pass. But just know that you're going to be in a business that will continue to have fun and bless the lives of families across the U.S. and across the world. So thanks for joining us today.
And stay tuned for keep an eye out for our email for the 13th, because we are going to have Sheryl on there and ways to utilize your facility. So we're really excited about that. And with that, we hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thanks
you,
again,
folks. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.